Man fired for becoming wheelchair-bound. Days later, the entire airport collapses. Robert Johnson felt his heart race as the wheels of his chair glided across the icy airport floor. 20 years dedicated to that place, and now he was being escorted out like an intruder. William Peterson walked behind the chair with firm steps, ignoring the curious stares of employees who paused their work to watch the scene. The general manager had just spoken the words Robert never imagined hearing. "Mr. Johnson, due to your new physical condition, we no longer consider you compatible with the duties of maintenance supervisor," William said, adjusting his blue tie while pushing the chair. "This decision is final." Robert clenched his fists on the armrests. 2 weeks earlier, a simple fall down the stairs at home had left him temporarily dependent on a wheelchair. The doctors were clear: 6 months of physical therapy, and he'd walk normally again. But William refused to even discuss temporary accommodations. "Dr. Peterson, I know every bolt in this airport," Robert said, trying to keep his voice steady. "My condition doesn't affect my mind." "The decision's already been made," William cut in sharply. Robert's co-workers watched in silence, some with tears in their eyes. George, a veteran on the cleaning crew, removed his cap in respect. Sarah from administration held Jessica's hand, both visibly emotional. Emily Johnson, 17, had arrived to pick up her father and witnessed the final moments of his humiliation. With her phone in hand, she discreetly recorded the end of the conversation, her eyes burning with outrage. Robert had started working at Denver International Airport when Emily was just a baby. He knew every system, every quirk of the old equipment, every adaptation made over the years to keep everything running smoothly. "Daddy," Emily whispered as she approached the chair, "let's go home." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. On the drive back, Robert stared out the car window at the planes taking off and landing. Emily drove in silence, but he could feel her anger radiating through the air. "Dad, this isn't over," she finally said. "I'm posting the video I recorded." "Emily, don't. I don't want trouble." "Trouble? Dad, you gave your whole life to that place. How many times did you stay late fixing problems no one else could solve? How many times did Mom eat alone because you were repairing some critical system?" Robert sighed deeply. Jennifer Thompson, his wife, was 6 months pregnant with their third child. The timing couldn't have been worse to lose his job. At home, Jennifer waited in the living room, her rounded belly prominent under her yellow floral dress. At 42, this pregnancy hadn't been planned, but they were both happy about the new baby. "How did it go?" she asked, already knowing the answer from their expressions. "Mom, they fired Dad," Emily said, still furious, "because of the wheelchair." Jennifer walked over to Robert and took his hands. They'd met 23 years ago when she worked at the airport cafe. She'd always known Robert was special, different from other men she'd met. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "We always do." "Jennifer, I'm scared," Robert admitted. "With the baby coming, the bills, the physical therapy. Dad, you'll walk again." "The doctors were clear," Emily interjected. "I know, sweetheart. But this might take longer than we expect." That night, Emily posted the video on social media with an emotional caption about injustice and discrimination. Within hours, the video had been shared thousands of times, sparking outraged comments from people all across the country. Meanwhile, at the airport, William Peterson had hastily hired Michael Davis, a recently graduated young engineer, to replace Robert. Michael had excellent academic references, but zero practical experience with the airport's specific systems. On Michael's first day, small problems began to arise. The cooling system in the West Terminal started fluctuating in temperature. Michael followed the standard manual, but didn't know that particular equipment had a quirk. It required manually adjusting a hidden valve behind the main panel. Robert always made that adjustment from memory, a trick he'd learned after years of experience. Without this knowledge, the system remained unstable, causing discomfort for passengers. George, from the cleaning crew, watched Michael struggle with the controls and sighed. He knew exactly what the problem was, having seen Robert fix it hundreds of times, but he didn't feel comfortable instructing the new supervisor. "Dr. Michael," George said timidly. Mr. Robert always adjusted a valve behind the panel when this happened. "Thank you, George, but I'll follow the technical protocol," Michael replied with a hint of superiority. The issue persisted for 3 days until William received formal complaints from passengers about the temperature discomfort. Irritated, he demanded an immediate solution from Michael. Meanwhile, Emily's video had reached nearly 1 million views. Local journalists began reaching out to the Johnson family for interviews. Robert, initially reluctant, eventually agreed to speak about his situation. "I don't hold any grudges," Robert told the Denver News 7 reporter. "I just want people to understand that a temporary disability doesn't define a person's ability." The segment aired on the evening news and stirred even more emotion. The airport started receiving calls from human rights organizations and disability advocacy groups. Pressured by the backlash, William called Robert on a Thursday afternoon. "Robert, I'm making you an offer," William said, trying to sound magnanimous. "You can return to an administrative role, handling paperwork and reports." "At what salary?" Robert asked directly. "Well, it would be a lower-level position, so the pay would reflect that." Robert felt anger rise in his chest. "Dr. William, is my experience and knowledge worth less now because I'm in a wheelchair?" "That's not it, Robert. It's just about matching the role to your current capabilities." "Thank you for the offer, but I decline," Robert said, hanging up the phone. Jennifer had overheard the conversation from the kitchen. She approached slowly, knowing she had to choose her words carefully. "Robert, maybe we should consider—" "Jennifer, I know we're in a tough spot, but accepting this offer would mean agreeing to discrimination. If I do that, I'd be validating what they did to me." "And what if we can't pay the bills?" Robert held his wife's hand, feeling the weight of responsibility. "We'll find another way, I promise." Emily, who had heard everything from her room, felt her heart ache. She admired her father's dignity, but also understood her mother's worry. She decided she needed to do something more. At the airport, problems continued to pile up. Besides the unstable cooling system, the baggage carousel in Section 3 started making a strange noise. Michael tried to identify the source, but couldn't pinpoint the issue. Robert knew that conveyor belt had a bearing that made noise when it was nearing the end of its lifespan. The part needed to be replaced before it seized up completely, but this knowledge existed only in Robert's memory. It had never been properly documented. Sarah from administration watched Michael with pity. She had worked side by side with Robert for 15 years and knew he would have fixed this kind of problem in minutes. "Michael," she said gently, "do you want me to call Robert? He could guide you." "Not necessary," Michael replied, too proud to admit he needed help. The following Friday, the conveyor belt seized up completely during peak hours, causing significant delays in baggage handling. 5 flights departed late, resulting in fines for the airport and complaints from the airlines. William was furious. "Michael, this is unacceptable. How did you not foresee this issue?" "Sir, I've been following all preventive maintenance protocols," Michael defended himself. "Then why didn't these things happen when Robert was here?" The question hung in the air unanswered. William began to realize he might have underestimated the importance of Robert's accumulated knowledge over the years. Emily had started a campaign on social media with the hashtag #JusticeForRobert. The story gained national traction, and people from all over America began sharing similar experiences of workplace discrimination. Over the weekend, Robert had an appointment with his physical therapist. The news was encouraging. His recovery was progressing well, but it would still take at least 4 months before he could walk unaided. "Doctor, if I used those Canadian crutches, would I be able to move around better?" Robert asked. "Yes, Robert. In fact, I recommend you start using them to gradually strengthen your leg muscles." "And could I work with them?" "Absolutely. You just need a few workplace adjustments." Robert left the appointment with renewed hope. Maybe there was a way to prove he could return to his duties. The following Monday, another problem arose at the airport. The electrical system in the East Terminal had a partial failure. Michael checked all the main circuit breakers, but couldn't identify which circuit was causing the issue. Robert had always known that circuit breaker number 47, located in a hard-to-reach technical room, controlled a specific section of the East Terminal. It was a circuit installed years ago during a poorly documented renovation. Without this knowledge, Michael wasted hours trying to find the source of the problem. Jessica from the technical team finally gathered the courage to suggest, "Michael, I think Robert would know where the issue is." "Jessica, I appreciate the suggestion, but I need to figure this out myself," Michael replied, clearly frustrated. The electrical issue affected the flight information system, causing confusion among passengers. William received more complaints and began seriously questioning his decision to let Robert go. That afternoon, Emily had an idea. She knew her father kept copies of all the manuals and modifications he'd made over the years at home. She decided to scan everything and create a complete archive of Robert's knowledge about the airport. "Dad, can I scan all your documents?" she asked. "What for, sweetheart?" "To show everyone how much you know about that place, how many solutions you've created, how many problems you've solved." Robert looked at his daughter with pride. "All right, Emily. Go ahead and scan everything." As Emily worked on digitizing the files, Robert received an unexpected call. It was George from the cleaning crew. "Mr. Johnson, sorry to call you at home, but I'm worried," George said quietly. "Things here are really bad. Michael is a good person, but he doesn't know the tricks you used to use." "George, I understand your concern, but I can't do anything right now." "Sir, couldn't you talk to Michael? Teach him a few things? It doesn't have to be official." Robert fell silent. Part of him wanted to help his colleagues, but another part felt it would validate William's discriminatory attitude. "Let me think about it, George. Thanks for calling." That night, Robert talked to Jennifer about George's call. "Jennifer, I'm torn. I want to help my colleagues, but I don't want William to think I'm desperate to come back." "Robert, you've always been someone who helps others. Don't let anger change who you are. But if I help, he might think he doesn't need to reinstate me officially. Or he might realize just how much you're missed." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. On Wednesday, the airport faced its biggest problem yet. During an unusual heat wave for the season, the central air conditioning system began to fail. The temperature in the main terminal rose to over 95 degrees, causing extreme discomfort for thousands of passengers. Michael tried everything to fix the issue, but the system was complex and outdated. There was a specific reboot sequence Robert had developed after years of working with that particular equipment. With passengers fainting from the heat and complaints pouring in, William made a desperate decision. He called Robert. "Robert, I need your help," William said, swallowing his pride. "The air conditioning system is down, and we have an emergency here." Robert heard the background noise, raised voices, urgent announcements, chaos unfolding. "Dr. Peterson, you fired me 2 weeks ago." "Robert, please, I can hire you as an emergency consultant, just to fix this one problem." "What would the consulting fee be?" "Whatever you think is fair," Robert thought quickly. $5,000 for today's consultation, plus the full amount of my previous salary from the day I was fired." Silence on the other end. "Robert, that's too much." "Dr. Peterson, you have an emergency. I'm offering a solution. Take it or leave it." William knew he had no choice. The costs of flight cancellations and compensations would be far greater. "Fine. Can you come now? I can guide you over the phone. Put Michael on." For the next 40 minutes, Robert walked Michael through the correct reboot sequence step by step. There was a specific order. First, shut off the main compressor. Wait 5 minutes. Restart the auxiliary system. Manually adjust 3 valves in technical room B, and only then restart the main system. "Michael, you'll hear a strange noise when you restart it. That's normal. Wait 3 minutes and the system will stabilize," Robert instructed over the phone. Just as Robert had predicted, the system came back online. Within 30 minutes, the terminal's temperature had normalized. William was impressed. Robert had fixed in 40 minutes what Michael couldn't solve in 6 hours. That afternoon, William transferred the agreed payment to Robert's account. Jennifer cried with relief when she saw the amount deposited. "Robert, you did it," she said, hugging her husband. "It was just a consultation, Jennifer. It doesn't mean I'm going back. But it shows they need you." Emily had finished digitizing all her father's documents. The file contained over 200 pages of technical solutions, creative adaptations, and procedures Robert had developed over the years. "Dad, look at how many things you've created," she said, showing the file on the computer. "You're not just an employee, you're the living memory of that airport." Robert was surprised by the amount of knowledge he had accumulated. It was 2 decades of small solutions that added up to a unique expertise. On Thursday, another problem arose. The backup power system failed during a routine test. Michael discovered there was a specific reboot procedure that wasn't officially documented. George approached Michael carefully. "Dr. Michael, Robert always said you had to press a red button hidden behind the large panel before turning on the backup." "Are you sure, George?" "Yes, sir. I saw him do it many times." Michael followed George's advice, and the system worked perfectly. He began to realize that Robert had developed practical solutions that went far beyond the official manuals. That afternoon, Michael called Robert. "Mr. Johnson, this is Michael. I wanted to thank you for your help yesterday and apologize." "Apologize for what, Michael?" "For thinking I could just replace you. I'm realizing you've developed a unique understanding of this airport." Robert was touched by the young man's humility. "Michael, you're capable. You just need time to learn the quirks of this place." "Sir, would it be possible to talk in person? I'd like to learn from you." Robert thought for a moment. "Michael, you can come to my house if you'd like." On Saturday, Michael visited Robert at home. Jennifer offered coffee and cake, and the 2 men talked for hours about the airport's systems. "Michael, this airport was built in the 80s. Over the years, there have been many poorly documented adaptations and renovations," Robert explained. "I've been around for almost all of them." "How did you memorize all this?" "It wasn't on purpose. It was years of solving problems, creating solutions, adapting old systems to work with new equipment." Michael took detailed notes of everything Robert explained. He began to realize he had vastly underestimated the complexity of the job. "Mr. Johnson, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. You're not angry with me, are you, for taking your position?" Robert smiled. "Michael, you weren't responsible for the discrimination I faced. You just took a job opportunity." Over the next week, Michael applied several of Robert's lessons and managed to solve problems that had once confused him. He began documenting everything he learned, creating an updated manual of procedures. But on Tuesday, a bigger issue arose. The baggage conveyor system had a cascading failure. One belt jammed, causing a backlog across the entire system. Michael tried to fix it using standard procedures, but had no success. He called Robert, but couldn't reach him because Jennifer had gone into premature labor. Robert was at the hospital for the birth of his son when his phone started ringing insistently. He saw it was calls from the airport, but decided his priority at that moment was being with his family. Nathan Johnson was born healthy, but Jennifer had some complications that required medical monitoring. Robert spent the whole night at the hospital, ignoring the calls from the airport. The next morning, when Robert finally checked his messages, he found over 20 missed calls and several frantic messages from Michael. Robert called back and learned that the airport had operated with serious baggage issues for nearly 12 hours. Many passengers missed connections because of the delays. "Michael, I'm sorry I didn't answer. My son was born overnight," Robert explained. "Mr. Robert, congratulations on the baby's birth. Sorry to bother you at such an important moment." "It's all right. Did you manage to solve the problem?" "Partially. The system is running, but it's unstable. I'm afraid it might stop again." Robert instructed Michael over the phone about a stabilization procedure that involved calibrating the speed of each conveyor belt individually. It was a delicate process Robert had perfected over the years. When Robert returned home with Jennifer and the baby, he found Emily organizing an online campaign that had gone national. The hashtag #TalkJusticeForRobert was among the most talked about topics in the country. "Dad, you won't believe it," Emily said excitedly. "Several human rights organizations reached out. They want to use your case as an example to push for changes in labor laws." "Emily, I just want my job back." "Dad, this has become something much bigger. You're standing up for thousands of people who face workplace discrimination." Robert felt torn between his personal responsibility to support his family and the social responsibility to fight for a greater cause. The following week, government inspectors showed up at Denver International Airport for a surprise audit. The visit had been prompted by the complaints that emerged after Robert's case gained attention. During the inspection, the auditors discovered several unofficial modifications to the electrical and climate control systems. Michael tried to explain they were creative solutions to keep the equipment running, but the inspectors labeled them as makeshift fixes and technical non-compliance. William was called in to explain why the airport operated with so many improvised solutions. He tried to blame the previous management, but records showed these modifications had been made recently. Mr. Peterson, who was responsible for these system modifications? The lead auditor asked. It was the former maintenance supervisor, William replied, not realizing he was incriminating himself. And where is that supervisor now? He was transferred to another department. The auditor checked the records and discovered Robert had been fired just 3 weeks earlier. She also noted that all the issues documented in the report had begun after Robert's departure. Mr. Peterson, you fired the one person who knew all these adaptations. William realized he was in a tough spot. It was an administrative decision based on job suitability. The audit resulted in a damning report for the airport. Beyond the technical violations, there was a lack of proper maintenance documentation. Emily followed the audit news with satisfaction. Dad, they're realizing you were essential to that place. Emily, I don't take pleasure in their troubles. Many of my former co-workers still work there and could be affected. But Dad, sometimes things have to get worse before people realize what they were doing wrong. Robert was conflicted. On one hand, he wanted justice. On the other, he knew his former colleagues weren't to blame for the situation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. Over the weekend, Robert got an unexpected call. It was Sarah from airport administration. Robert, can I talk to you? It's about something very serious. Of course, Sarah, what's going on? Robert, remember those maintenance reports William always asked you to change? Robert listened carefully. Yes, I do. He always told me to lower the estimated costs. Exactly. I kept copies of the original reports you wrote before he made you alter them. Why? Women's intuition, I don't know. I always thought it was strange he asked you to change the numbers. Sarah, what are you saying? Robert, I think William was embezzling money from maintenance. You always worked miracles with slashed budgets, but the money that was saved never stayed in the company. Robert felt a chill in his stomach. If this were true, it meant he had been an unwitting accomplice to something very serious. Sarah, are you sure about what you're saying? I have all the documents, Robert. I can prove that over the last 3 years, more than $200,000 were cut from the maintenance budget, but those savings don't show up anywhere in the financial records. What do you want me to do? I think we should hand this over to the auditors. Robert fell silent, processing the information. Sarah, this is very serious. Are you sure you want to get involved? Robert, you were fired unfairly, and now I've found out it might have been to cover up something worse. I can't stay quiet. All right. Let's meet tomorrow so you can show me these documents. On Sunday, Sarah visited Robert at home and showed him the documents she had kept. It was clear there was a discrepancy between the original budgets Robert had proposed and the final amounts approved by William. Look here, Robert, Sarah said, pointing to a spreadsheet. You requested $30,000 to replace the air conditioning filtration system. William cut it to $15,000, claiming savings. But in the financial records, the $15,000 saved doesn't appear anywhere. Robert examined the documents carefully. Something was clearly wrong. Sarah, how did you get access to the financial records? I have a friend in accounting. She helped me cross-check the information. And does she know why you were looking into this? Yes, she does. Amanda was also outraged by your dismissal. She said she always admired your work. Robert felt increasingly convinced he needed to take action. Sarah, let's hand this over to the auditors first thing tomorrow. On Monday morning, Robert and Sarah went to the temporary office the auditors had set up at Denver International Airport. The lead auditor, Dr. Elizabeth Parker, greeted them with interest. Mr. Johnson, I understand you were the maintenance supervisor until recently, the auditor said. That's right, Doctor. and I have some information that might be important for the audit." Robert and Sarah presented all the documents they had gathered. The auditor was visibly impressed by the amount of evidence. "Mr. Johnson, these discrepancies are very serious. Do you have any idea how much money might be involved?" "Doctor, based on our calculations, it could be over $500,000 in the last 5 years." "And you never questioned these budget cuts?" "I questioned them several times, but the director always claimed it was necessary for savings. I ended up doing the work with fewer resources, improvising solutions." "Are those improvisations the makeshift fixes we found during the inspection?" "Exactly. I always warned that they were temporary solutions and would need to be reviewed once there was proper funding." The auditor took notes and assured them the investigation would be thorough. "Mr. Johnson, would you be willing to officially cooperate with the investigation?" "Yes, Doctor." When Robert left the meeting, he felt a mix of relief and worry. Relief that the truth was finally coming out, and worry about the consequences it might bring. That afternoon, William was called in by the auditors to explain the discrepancies in the budgets. He tried to justify the cuts as necessary cost-saving measures, but couldn't explain where the saved money had gone. "Mr. Peterson, according to the documents we have, over $500,000 were cut from the maintenance budget in the last 5 years, said the auditor. "Where is this money?" "That money was redirected to other operational areas," William stammered. "Which areas?" "We found no records of these transfers." William began to sweat. "I need to check with the finance department." "We already did, Mr. Peterson. The finance department has no record of any such transfers." William's situation was getting more complicated by the minute. The auditors suspended the questioning and asked him to present complete documentation the next day. That night, William called Robert in a desperate attempt to turn things around. "Robert, can we talk?" "Of course, Doctor." "William." "Robert, I think there was a misunderstanding about your dismissal. I'd like to propose your immediate reinstatement." "Dr. William, what's changed since last week?" "Robert, I've always recognized your value. Maybe I made a hasty decision." Robert sensed William was trying to use his reinstatement to gain credibility with the auditors. "Dr. William, I'm interested in returning to work, but only under the right conditions." "What conditions?" "First, reinstatement as supervisor with full salary. Second, all necessary accommodations for my current condition. Third, a guarantee that I'll never face discrimination again." "Robert, that can be negotiated." "And fourth, full transparency in the maintenance budgets. I want to be part of the financial decisions for my department." A long silence followed on the other end of the line. "Robert, that last condition is complicated." "Dr. William, either I return with full autonomy to do my job properly, or I don't return at all. I need to think. You have until tomorrow to decide. After that, my priority will be cooperating with the audit." By Tuesday, the situation at the airport deteriorated quickly. That morning, the climate control system failed again. Without Robert there to guide the solution, Michael took 4 hours to fix the problem. In the afternoon, one of the main conveyor belts stopped working entirely. Michael tried to apply the lessons Robert had taught him, but without success. The baggage system became congested, causing significant delays. William watched the chaos unfold and realized he could no longer deny Robert's importance. At 4 p.m., he called Robert. "Robert, I accept all your conditions. Can you come back tomorrow?" "Dr. William, I need a written agreement." "Fine. I'll have the document prepared now. And I want a meeting with the entire maintenance department to clarify my situation." "Robert, you're pushing it." "Dr. William, I was humiliated publicly when I left. I want my return to be just as public." William had no choice. "Fine." That night, Robert talked to Jennifer about the offer. "Jennifer, I think I got what I wanted. I'm going back under better conditions than before." "Robert, are you sure you want to go back there?" "After everything that happened." "Jennifer, that place is part of my life, and now I have the chance to make things better." "What if William tries to hurt you again?" "Now I have protection. The audit is exposing everything he's done wrong. He won't have the power to hurt me anymore." Wednesday morning, Robert returned to the airport. This time, he arrived using Canadian crutches, showing his progress in recovery. William organized a meeting with the entire maintenance department. Robert was greeted with warm applause from all his colleagues. "Everyone," William said, clearly uncomfortable, "Robert is returning to his position as maintenance supervisor. We hope this transition will be smooth for all." George couldn't hold back his emotions. "Mr. Johnson, it's so good to have you back. Things here weren't the same without you." Michael approached Robert with a smile. "Mr. Johnson, I'm really happy about your return. I hope we can work together. Michael, you'll stay as my main assistant. I want you to document everything I teach, so this knowledge isn't lost again." During his first week back, Robert worked tirelessly to stabilize all the systems that had faced issues in his absence. He also began implementing important changes in maintenance management. "Michael, from now on, all special procedures must be documented," Robert said. "We can't rely on just one person's memory anymore." "Understood, Mr. Johnson. I'll create a complete manual. And one more thing, any budget cuts need technical justification. We won't accept arbitrary reductions anymore." The audit continued its investigation into financial irregularities. That week, they discovered William had created a shell company that provided consulting services to the airport. The money saved from maintenance was being funneled to this fake company. On Friday, William was called in again by the auditors, this time accompanied by a representative from the district attorney's office. "Mr. Peterson, we've found that you own WP Consulting, which received over $400,000 from the airport for consulting services in the last 3 years, the prosecutor said. That's legal," William stammered. "It would be legal if it had been declared. You omitted this information when you took the director position. This constitutes a conflict of interest and possibly embezzlement." William realized his situation was becoming untenable. "I can explain. You'll have a chance to explain in a formal interrogation. For now, you're suspended from your duties." The news of William's suspension spread quickly through the airport. Robert received the information with mixed feelings, relief to see justice served, but also concern about the instability it might cause. Sarah sought Robert out late that afternoon. "Robert, I heard about William's suspension." "Yes, Sarah, and I want to thank you for your courage in exposing this." "Robert, do you think we did the right thing?" "Sarah, the truth always needs to come out. What he did hurt not just me, but the entire airport." "What now? Who'll take over as director?" "The board will appoint an interim director until the situation is resolved." Over the weekend, Robert spent time with his family, reflecting on everything that had happened in recent weeks. Nathan, his newborn son, slept peacefully in his crib, while Emily showed her father the positive comments still pouring in on social media. "Dad, you've become a symbol of standing up against discrimination," Emily said proudly. "Emily, I just wanted to do my job. I never imagined it could inspire others. But that's what happens when you fight for your rights. Others feel encouraged to fight too." Jennifer approached with Nathan in her arms. "Robert, I'm so proud of you. You didn't give up when everything seemed lost." "Jennifer, none of this would have been possible without your support. There were moments I thought about accepting anything just to keep us from hardship. And it was precisely by not accepting just anything that you got everything you wanted." The following Monday, Robert learned the board had appointed Dr. Catherine Reynolds as interim director. She was an experienced executive with a history of transparent and inclusive leadership. Dr. Catherine scheduled a meeting with Robert on her first day. "Mr. Johnson, I want to start by apologizing for what you've been through these past few weeks," she said sincerely. "Dr. Catherine, I appreciate the apology. What matters now is that we move forward." "Exactly. I want to implement significant changes in how this airport is managed, and I'd like to rely on your experience in this process." "I'm happy to contribute." First change, complete budget transparency. Second, an inclusion and accessibility program. Third, valuing the knowledge of veteran employees. Robert was impressed by the new director's vision. "Doctor, these changes are exactly what this airport needs. And there's more. I'd like you to lead a project documenting all the special procedures developed over the years. This knowledge can't depend on just one person's memory. It would be an honor to be part of this project. In the following weeks, Robert worked intensively on creating a comprehensive airport procedures manual. Michael became his right-hand man on the project, and together, they documented decades of accumulated knowledge. The documentation project revealed the extent of Robert's expertise. There were over 300 special procedures, creative adaptations, and technical solutions he had developed over the years. "Michael, now I understand why you all had so many problems when I left," Robert said, flipping through the completed manual. "Mr. Johnson, it was a humbling lesson for all of us. We learned to value knowledge that isn't found in books." Dr. Catherine was amazed when Robert presented the finished manual. "Mr. Johnson, this is extraordinary work. This manual should be used as a model in other airports. Doctor, it was a pleasure to organize everything I've learned here. Mr. Johnson, I have a proposal. I'd like you to take on the role of maintenance manager, overseeing not just technical procedures but also training new employees." Robert was surprised by the offer. "Doctor, that's a big responsibility, and you're the right person for it. What do you say?" "I accept, but on one condition." "What's that?" "I want to implement a mentorship program where veteran employees share their knowledge with newer hires." "Excellent idea. You can start developing the program right away." Emily watched the changes in her father's career with growing pride. "Dad, not only did you come back, but you got an even better position than before." "Emily, sometimes you have to go through hardships to discover your true worth. And now you'll be able to help others who go through the same thing." "That's my goal. I want this airport to be an example of inclusion and professional respect." The investigation into William resulted in his termination for just cause and criminal charges for embezzlement. The shell company was dissolved, and the misused funds were recovered to invest in airport improvements. Robert used part of the recovered budget to implement accessibility upgrades throughout the airport. Ramps, adapted elevators, braille signage, and other modifications were installed. "Michael, these improvements don't just help people with disabilities," Robert explained during an inspection. "They help seniors, travelers with heavy luggage, parents with strollers. I never thought of it that way, Mr. Johnson. Inclusion benefits everyone. That's something William never understood." The mentorship program Robert implemented became a success. Veteran employees from all departments began sharing their knowledge with newer colleagues, creating a culture of continuous learning. George, from the cleaning staff, became a mentor in building maintenance. "Mr. Johnson, I never imagined my experience could be useful for teaching others. George, we all have valuable knowledge. The difference is having the opportunity to share it." 6 months after his return, Robert was walking normally, using only a cane for support on days with more physical exertion. His physical recovery had been complete, but the lessons learned during his time in the wheelchair remained. During an appreciation ceremony organized by Dr. E. Catherine, Robert was honored for his dedication and the positive changes he implemented at the airport. "Mr. Johnson, thanks to your work, this airport has become a benchmark for inclusion and participatory management," said the director during her speech. Robert, moved, responded, "Dr. Reynolds, colleagues, family, this experience taught me that our true strength lies in our ability to rise after a fall and use what we've learned to help others." Emily in the audience cried with pride as she watched her father being publicly recognized. Robert's story spread beyond the airport. He was invited to speak at companies and universities about inclusion, perseverance, and professional growth. "Dad, you've become an inspiration to thousands of people," Emily said after one of his talks. "Emily, if my experience can help others keep fighting for their rights, then it was all worth it." A year after the wrongful termination, Robert had not only regained his job, but achieved a far higher position than before. The airport implemented model inclusion policies, and Robert became a national reference for inclusive management. Jennifer watched her husband playing with Nathan in their backyard, while Emily showed her little brother videos of their father's speeches. "Robert, do you remember when you thought all was lost?" she asked. "I do, Jennifer, but you always said we'd find a way. And we did. Better than we imagined. Jennifer, I learned that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover our true worth. and that we should never accept being treated with disrespect, especially that. Nathan babbled happily in his father's arms, unaware he'd been born during a pivotal moment in the family's story. Robert looked at his son and thought about the kind of world he wanted to leave for him. "Nathan, Daddy will work hard so you grow up in a fairer world," Robert whispered, "where people are valued for what they know and do, not judged by appearances." The transformation at the airport became a success story studied in universities and companies. Robert received constant invitations to share his experience, but always made sure to return home in time for family dinners. "Dad, do you regret turning down William's initial offer?" Emily asked during one dinner. "Never, sweetheart. If I'd accepted a lower position, I'd have validated discrimination. Fighting for my rights was the only right choice. What if it hadn't worked out? But it did, Emily. Not always how we expect, but justice always finds a way." Dr. Reynolds, who became a close family friend, often said Robert's arrival as manager was the best thing to happen to the airport in decades. Robert transformed not just technical procedures, but the entire organizational culture, she remarked in meetings with other executives. "Today we have a more inclusive, collaborative, and efficient workplace." The mentorship program Robert created was adopted by other airports nationwide. He became a national consultant on inclusive management, always emphasizing that diversity isn't just a moral issue, but a competitive advantage. In his speeches, Robert often shared, "When I was fired, I thought my career was over. In truth, it was only beginning in a more meaningful way." The story of the Johnson family became a symbol of resilience and triumph. Emily, inspired by her father's struggle, decided to study law with a focus on human rights. "Dad, I want to help others who go through what you did," she declared when choosing her major. "Emily, that's the best way to honor our fight, by helping others claim their rights," Robert replied. Nathan grew up in a home where inclusion and respect for differences were fundamental values. Even without fully understanding, he absorbed these lessons through his parents' example. Robert kept a file with all the messages he received from people inspired by his story. Hundreds of accounts from workers who found the courage to confront discrimination in their jobs. "Jennifer, sometimes I think our fight was bigger than we imagined," Robert remarked while reading a thank you note. "Robert, you changed lives. That's far more important than any position or salary. And it all started because we refused to accept injustice." Exactly. You taught our children that it's worth fighting for what's right. The Denver International Airport, where Robert worked, became an international model for inclusive management. Delegations from other countries came to study the practices he implemented. During one such visit, an American executive remarked, "We've never seen an inclusion program this successful. How did you achieve it?" "Simple," Robert replied. "We treat every employee as a valuable person, regardless of physical limitations or other traits." "But what about productivity?" "It increased significantly. When people feel valued, they give their best." Robert's methodology was documented in a book that became a reference in human resources management. He donated all royalties to organizations fighting for disability rights. In an interview with Denver News 7, Robert was asked what made him proudest of his journey. "What makes me proudest is knowing our fight opened doors for others. I get daily messages from workers who kept their jobs or improved their conditions because they were inspired by our story." And what advice would you give to those facing workplace discrimination? Never accept disrespect. Document everything. Seek support. Fight for your rights. Justice may take time, but it always comes. And if the fight seems impossible, remember that every small victory makes the world fairer. We fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who comes after. 5 years after that difficult day when he was fired, Robert Johnson had become one of the most respected figures in America's airport industry. His story was shared in schools as an example of perseverance and dignity. Emily, now a law graduate, worked as a labor rights attorney, always carrying the lessons learned from her father's fight. 5-year-old Nathan played airport at home, always adding ramps and elevators so all his toys could work together. Jennifer watched the family they had built and felt grateful for the trials that had strengthened them. "Robert, remember when you asked if we'd get through that hard time?" she said one quiet afternoon. I do. You always had more faith than me. It wasn't faith, Robert. It was certainty. Certainty that a man of integrity like you would always find a way. We found it together, Jennifer. This victory is ours. And so, the story that began with injustice became a lesson in dignity, resilience, and social change. Robert Johnson proved that when we fight for our rights with determination and integrity, we not only change our own lives, but also contribute to a fairer world for everyone. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this inspiring story of perseverance and the fight for justice. Do you know someone who has been through a similar situation? Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Robert's decision not to accept a lower position. Your likes and subscriptions to the channel motivate us to keep bringing stories that inspire and move you